So recording is starting, and maybe in case you don't have the agenda right at your fingertips, I will stick that in the chat box real quick. Bruce was going to share just sort of an update on NUIA testing. Seems to be going smoothly. NUIA testing is the entire window of October. And he was just going to share from a tech related side that there haven't been any major issues. We did encounter a few issues in the spring in terms of we had updated all of the apps, but the NUIA app had an issue if you went to the newer updated version. We didn't seem to run into that this time, so thank goodness. That seemed to be going pretty smoothly. And then the other thing, I told you I'm going to put this in the chat box and I haven't done it yet. Here we go. There it is. There's the agenda. The other thing that I'm a little more well-versed in, because I helped Bruce to secure this grant, is a tech cart grant that the state is offering in their support for more technology-based instruction happening in schools. So it was sort of strange how they put all of this information out, but basically they said every school in Maine is going to get a tech cart. So go ahead and apply for your tech cart. And we had a choice of 3 different types of tech carts. I'll talk through the options of what we could receive in just a minute. Oops, looks like this is Paul. And so they said you have about a week to fill out the application. And then 2 days into that week, where we had the end of the week to fill out the application, they wrote back really quickly and then called everybody and said, we actually have to know by the end of the day today what you want for your tech carts. And by the way, you can get a tech cart per every 100 students in a school. So our students that have 200 plus students in the school, we could get 2 tech carts. And we actually have enough students throughout the district that we were able to obtain 2 tech carts per school building. So every school building will be receiving option 1 and option 3, which I'll show you those in just a moment. The way that it works, each tech cart is worth about $5,000. So our district is receiving $70,000. We had to fill out a grant. So it's actually more like a grant. It's not like the Maine Department of Ed is just going to send us these tech carts. So there's a lot more work than I think we currently had sort of envisioned involved in this, as is typical, but it's still exciting. I think our tech integrators are looking forward to receiving these tech carts, and I think they will be great. But we are still waiting for our final approval and then the process of moving this into sort of a grant related system, which would then allow us to have the funding to connect with the different vendors. We'll have to connect with the vendors. We're going to have to secure all of the supplies, and then the Department of Ed would basically reimburse us. So sort of a roundabout way of saying we got these great tech carts, but now we're going to go back and do a lot of work to make sure that we actually receive the tech carts. But nonetheless, I think they're going to be great. I will show you what the 2 options look like. So there were 3 options. There's a robotics and programming lab, which we have decided to get this for every single school. This one is basically these Sphero robots that students can program. And one of the reasons that we purchased this, it comes with everything that's listed here. These Sphero craft packs are not super expensive. So in terms of having something that's a consumable that's used up each year and needs to be replaced, it's not a high cost. So this is a cart that we can use for many years. The second option, which I'm not going to pull up, is an augmented virtual reality cart, which looked really cool. Bruce was really jazzed about it. But we didn't decide to go with that cart because it came with a 1-year software that the department would be willing to pay for, but any cost going forward would be at the cost of the district. And it was quite pricey, like $1,200 a year. So for multiple carts, we'd be looking at like $8,000 a year for something that we really hadn't planned for, and we really don't quite know how it works yet. So we didn't want to make that investment. So we did not go with the virtual reality, augmented reality cart, but we do have robotics and programming lab that we're planning on. And then the second cart that each school would receive is option 3, coding and hardware. And this one is differentiated based on school level. So we're getting the elementary option for the 4 elementary schools. It comes with a Lego Spike Essentials kit, which looks like this, and then the folding cart. And we're going with the secondary option for the middle school and the high school. So they will receive the Lego Spike Prime hybrid classroom pack, and then the cart that comes with that as well. So each school will be receiving 2 carts once we're able to get final word that our application is approved, which I'm pretty sure they're just sort of carte blanche approving all of the applications. They just haven't quite finished that process yet. So we're looking forward to having these carts in each of our schools, and it looks like both of these options will be something that we can use for many years to come.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. Absolutely great.
Yeah. No questions about those?
Think they can ever be rolled into our boardroom for a public display of something?
Possibly. Yeah, I think at the last board meeting, we were talking too about how one year Lori Walsh came to the board meeting and showed the e-bots and talked a little bit about those. So I think we could certainly have a presentation or workshop where you get to see what those look like. Yeah.
Anytime that kids can be on camera, like on YouTube, if their parents want to watch or grandparents, I mean, that's all good. So that's great.
So that's all I have for the tech session of this.
Quite a bit.
Quite fluent in the tech-based language, but I will be the one supporting that grant component, and Bruce and I will work on connecting with the vendors once we get cleared to use the money.
Very cool.
Yeah. So for the curriculum portion, I lied. Colton's only doing a piece of this. Colton will be here to talk a little bit about the bar model at OMS, and I've got a brief update from Jesse as well. But before we get to that, I had put on the agenda attendance data because I wanted to come back to some data each time, like this group requested and like the greater board requested. But I'm going to need a little bit more time for the attendance piece. I did receive reports. I met with Jess Anderson, who is our partner with Count Me In. She provided John and I with full reports, and I was hoping to go over those with you guys, but I've been reflecting a lot on those. I will pull them up just so that you have the context of why I want to rethink things just a little bit. And let me do that right now, just so that you can know why I'm a little conflicted. So this is our K-5 attendance report. And Jess did a great job pulling all of this together. You'll notice when there's a comparison with the 2018-19 data to the 2021-22 data, there's huge spikes in our chronic absenteeism, which is missing 10% or more school days. There is no data in here for the 2020-2021 year, which was like our hybrid kind of messy getting back into school year. So we're not even comparing apples to apples or like a fruit to a fruit here. I feel like this report sort of compares like apples to I don't know, books. Like they're not even in the same category. And part of why I'm saying that is because when you look at this, and we'll look at this by school. So this is Ash Point. You see these huge spike increases, which look really scary. But the reality of last year, and this was also the reality of the 2020-2021 school year, which you don't see any data for, is that we were quarantining students. Now, when we've talked about this in our admin team, quarantining does play a role in chronic absenteeism, because every day that a student misses is important to take that time into consideration because it's missed classroom level instruction. But I think when we're trying to draw conclusions from this data, it's sort of misleading because we're requiring these students not to come to school. Now, that doesn't account for every single one of these cases. There are certainly students within these orange numbers that were simply chronically absent because they were just not coming to school, not that they were quarantined. But we also have a massive number of students, keeping in mind, we had 690 cases last year. And for the first part of the school year, we were quarantining any students who were a close contact who were not vaccinated. So quarantining meaning they were out of school, and sometimes that was 5 days because we happened to catch it when the student was on what would have been day 3 of their quarantine. Sometimes it was the sibling of, so a student tested positive in the household, or mom and dad test positive in the household. The student who is not positive needs to quarantine through their quarantine period and then isolate for an additional 10 days. So again, this data looks really scary, like, oh my gosh, like what was going on last year? Well, a lot of COVID cases and quarantining was going on last year. So one of the things that I want to do, and let me just stop sharing that for just a minute. I'm planning on having our data specialists run those same chronic absenteeism numbers, but isolate what we put in as Q codes, because we coded all of those quarantine days as Q codes. We can run that data one more time to see just chronic absenteeism minus anybody that was required to quarantine. And I think that's going to give us more accurate data, because I shared this with the board at the last meeting. One of the goals that we have, and this was actually the goal that was suggested to us by Jess Anderson, is that we reduce our chronic absenteeism rate by 20%. Well, that's automatically going to happen because we're not quarantining to the same extreme that we were last year. But it also, again, we're not comparing the right data just because of all of those different factors that went into quarantining non-vaccinated students last year. The other piece of that is in K-5, there was no vaccine for students until December. So, and they weren't considered fully vaccinated. I think it was like December 21st when they're then considered fully vaccinated. So any of our students for the first half of the year who were in K-5, who were exposed to a positive COVID case, remember, this is even on the soccer field. The whole soccer team would have to quarantine. That's a lot of kids. So that really impacts our data. So I sort of want to go back through and just make sure that we've got more accurate data that eliminates those quarantined students out of that chronic absenteeism data.
So Stephanie, if I understand correctly, you're going to separate the chronic absenteeism versus truancy, essentially. And you can look at truancy apples to apples more than you can given the pandemic.
Sort of. I'm going to just eliminate all of any student that we require to be out of school for quarantining. I'm going to take them out of the equation, because that way we're not looking at the students that we required to not come to school because of a close contact or they were positive with COVID. And we're still going to see some of those quarantine cases this year. It really only affects the student who is testing positive this year. And we certainly still have some of those, but nowhere near the degree of how many students had to quarantine last year. I mean, we had kids that were out for 20 days in a row because they had multiple cases within the household, sometimes more than that.
Right, but wouldn't the same thing by just isolating the truancy cases, wouldn't that give you the data that we're looking for? Because if they're quarantined, if they're not allowed to come to school because of close contact or whatever, that's absent for a reason versus absent without a reason.
The only difference is truancy data is absent unexcused, and our chronic absenteeism data is all absences.
Right.
So it would, our chronic absent student might also be the student who has gone on 3 trips to Florida throughout the year. They're not considered truant because they're excused,
I
but they
see.
are chronically absent because they've missed 3 weeks of school.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, a quick question here. Even normalized with the stripping out, using the Q codes to normalize, isn't it still difficult to do the comparison because it was, even with that, a somewhat strange year. I mean, you weren't physically at school, so being truant from the school premises is very different from being truant from virtual school.
Yeah, it's still going to be tricky to compare. Like, I don't want to look at last year's data and try to compare it to the previous year or the year before that. Like,
Right.
the chart has the blue data from 2018-19 versus the orange data from last year. I still don't think we're going to be able to make any comparisons to that. But what the new data will do for us is we can then compare this year's data, eliminate our Q codes, because again, we're still going to have a few sprinkled through, but we can better see for those, anything else that's like non-quarantine related, how does our data look? So it's sort of just isolating that quarantine piece.
Gotcha, makes sense.
So more to come on that. I guess we did have a data discussion, but it wasn't quite what I was hoping to present to you. But I'm going to need a little more time. Joseph is in the full throes of October reporting right now for all of our state reporting. So I'm giving him time and space to finish that first before I ask him to run any additional data for us. So it might be November until we're able to get to that piece.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm sure you're way ahead of me on this, but it's kind of, what would be really fascinating is if you're able to identify some of these truancy trends and against the demographic, I don't know, multi-factor analysis of some kind, so you can see which populations are creating, you know, the data that we seek to resolve over the course of time.
Yeah, one of the things we discussed in the summer as an admin team was the impact of the rate of chronic absenteeism that we see from our transient population is significantly higher than any other population. So that stands out. And then there are certain cities that seem to stand out more. So we can isolate it by school, but that doesn't quite tell us all that much as when we isolate data from Oceanside Middle School and Oceanside High School by town, by residents of the student. Rockland residents has a much higher increase in chronic absenteeism than any other town. Yeah, so those are definitely pieces that I think, you know, if we can sort of isolate that quarantine piece, we can better look at the data to try to figure out where are our inroads, where are the places where we might be able to make a difference, because we can't do much about the quarantine. I wish we could go back and change that. I wish we didn't have to quarantine students now, but you know, that's something that we don't have any control over. So what part of the data do we have control over? Yeah, good question. All right, so I will move right along and I will promise to bring you a more accurate report of the attendance in the future. The other thing that I wanted to mention to this group is a work in progress. Let me just pull it up on my screen. Brad has been meeting and has another meeting on the horizon with a focus group of social workers and school counselors. The Student Engagement Task Force has met with Jess Anderson. So this is sort of tied into the Count Me In piece that we're partnering with Jess Anderson. She suggested that a next step is to work on what are community resources? What do we have available that schools might be able to partner with some existing supports for students? So we're trying to work on gathering some district connections, have one document that any of our social workers, school counselors, principals can use to help connect students with and families with some opportunities that are right here in our community. So I'll just take a minute to share what that work in progress looks like. I have told people the more fingerprints that we can get on this, not just mine, is going to make this a much more robust document to use. So I know I've got some people that have plans on adding to this. I know it takes some time, but I'm predicting that this is going to become much more robust than how it looks right now. So we're Brad's work in meeting with the school counselors and social workers, they help develop some of the needs. Like we really need some additional resources and supports for mental and behavioral health. You'll see substance abuse on here, hunger, homelessness and housing, clothing. So they've contributed a lot of those ideas for needs. And then so our next task is thinking about what are some of the resources within our community that can help with that need. And at the last meeting, when Lauren was sharing this with the Student Engagement Task Force, the landing place included their information on here. And then what else? I think the landing place also included the Knox County Homeless Coalition information. I went to their website. There's a whole wealth of other community partners just on their website. So there's lots of different places to pull from. But in order to prevent our social workers and school counselors from having to do that themselves and then, find the rabbit holes, we want to have one concise document that can just sort of be the go-to document for support. So that's sort of the work in progress that connects back to that attendance component as well.
Stephanie, has anyone reached out to New Hope Mid-Coast?
I think we had it listed on here, maybe.
Used to be called New Hope for Women, but now it's New Hope Mid-Coast.
Yeah. It's not on our chart yet, but it did come through from United Mid-Coast Charities. They were a grant recipient. So we put those as a list at the bottom of that document to filter up through onto the document, because there were quite a few that Mid-Coast United Charities had listed as some supports, plus their grant recipients. So maybe there's a way that we can, connect and our students can benefit from that too.
I just want to thank Stephanie for taking the lead on this and developing the Google Doc and starting the conversation. I think this is a really important resource that we're developing, and she's put a lot of time and effort into it. I think it's really important that we have this as a district, because I know some people have this sort of set of contacts and other people have another set of contacts. And if we can put them all together and share them, I think it's going to be really helpful for the people who are supporting our students. The other area I'd love to see us expand into is having organizations that can really develop that one caring relationship per student, or at least one caring relationship per student. I don't know if they're big brother, big sister type of organizations out there, or other type of organizations that we can partner with or identify, so that if a student is struggling with chronic absenteeism or behavior issues or other types of things, that we can really find a caring adult to really help guide them. I think that would be a great thing to include in that resource as well. And I don't know where exactly that sort of spills into our work in this committee versus the work that the councils are doing, but I think there's a lot of overlap. And I think if we can all put our brains together to identify some of those organizations that can help pair students who are struggling with other caring adults, that would really benefit our district quite a lot.
Oh. Great.
Yep, agreed.
I forgot to mention that for this curriculum meeting, sort of following what we had talked about back in August, that the first meeting that we had in September was sort of more about the pathways theme. This meeting is more about the relationships theme. And then the next meeting will be more about sort of the proficiency-based theme, because I should have lots of data to share with you from our NUIA assessments. So we'll sort of keep on going with those themes. And that's part of why I asked Colton if he would be willing to come and share with you guys today as well. We're moving into the second year of the BAR model at Oceanside Middle School. And Colton's just going to give you a brief update on some trainings that the staff have done so far this year. And then Colton, if you just want to share some pros and maybe some things that the team is still working through and just how things are going.
Sure. Thanks for having me, everyone. Nice to see you. Should I start with like a kind of the basics of BAR? Do people know
Yes.
what BAR is?
Yes.
Okay.
Basics are good.
Sure. So BAR stands for Building Assets, Reducing Risk. It is a program that was originally developed in St. Paul, Minnesota, and has expanded to, I don't know how many schools, a lot of schools in a lot of states. So how's that for concrete data? But the basic premise of BAR is that it is a system to support every kid in school. And it's a way to kind of centralize data, centralize teacher experiences and observations into one place and allow us to be much more efficient and systematic in how we support kids and making sure that we are, I know that Brad and I know Lauren has talked many times about the every caring adult, but making sure we're talking about every single kid and caring about every single kid in that way. So what BAR looks like in practice, and it's a little bit hard to I think kind of understand what it all looks like in the kind of a tangible sense, unless you live it every day, but I'll do my best. So it has 4 specific pieces. So the first part is a direct instruction piece in social emotional learning, which we call iTimes. Students do that every Monday during their Compass time. Compass is like used to be called tutorial. It's a little bit of a flex time, but every kid has Compass on Mondays all at the same time. And so they are doing iTimes every single Monday. And we put a lot of work in over the summer. We had 2 of our teachers and our social worker, who is our BAR coordinator, spent a lot of time over the summer going through the iTimes, picking out specific ones and matching them to specific grade levels. Of course, in middle school, our 6th graders look very different from our 8th graders. And the iTimes were kind of originally written for high school kids. So there's a little bit of adaptation that needs to happen. Not all of them are appropriate for middle schoolers. So we put a lot of work in over the summer to really make sure that iTimes were appropriate and focused for what we needed for our students. So that's the first piece, is iTime. The other 3 pieces of BAR are kind of incremental levels of student support meetings. So the first part is called small block. A small block meeting happens once a week, and it happens just with the students' core teachers. So the math, English, social studies, and science teacher. During those small block meetings, the goal is that they are working down through every kid. Certainly not every week, but probably every 6 weeks or so, they will move through every kid in their cohort. And what they're doing is they're going through and they're looking at connections to school, they're looking at strengths, then they move across. And I could, if you wanted to, I can show you the spreadsheet that backs all of this up. Sorry, should have had it up originally. But then they look at concerns at school, and then students get leveled. And so if they are leveled 0, that's a thriving student. A level 1 is a teacher level intervention. A level 2 is what we might call a school-wide or a school level intervention. And then a level 3 student is what we might call like a community-based intervention. So that's the highest level. So as teachers go through in small block, they're leveling students. The goal is that every student starts at a 0 or a 1. We do not place students at 2s or 3s unless there is a very specific situation, some sort of acute trauma or some very specific situation. So a student gets placed as a 1 in small block. The teachers implement a teacher level intervention with a corresponding goal. They follow up on that 2 weeks later. If that goal, or if the student is not or continuing not to make progress towards that goal, or is continuing to show that level of concern, then they may be leveled up to a level 2. And what happens there is that moves to second level of meetings, which is called big block meetings. And so big block are the students' core teachers, again, that same group. We then bring in 2 of our allied arts teachers, and then they have 1 member of, or I guess they have 2 members of the admin/student services team. The 2 of our grade levels have 1 admin, 1 student services, but we only have 2 admin here. So 6th grade has Nadezhda, who's our BAR coordinator, and then 1 of our school counselors. So when a student gets to big block meeting, the idea is that the core teacher will share what the student, their strengths, their connections, their concern, the intervention that was tried, and then there's a brainstorm to come up with the next level intervention that's usually that is a little bit higher. Big block is the only part of bar that we did not do last year, and that's largely because we did not have a way in our schedule to make it work. So we're really still trying to kind of figure out big block and how to make it really effective. We just started those a few weeks ago. We do that during our common planning time in the morning. Big block functions largely the same way. We don't go through every kid at big block. We go through students who are level to level 2, but the same process happens. There's a goal. It's usually the same goal from small block, but it could be adjusted. And then there's a larger intervention put in place. 2 weeks later, we return to that student. We gauge their progress. We can either determine we need to try a different school level intervention. We need to continue this intervention. We could level a student down, say this intervention has achieved progress towards this goal or has achieved the goal. We may level them back to a level 1 to continue for monitoring during small block, or we can level them up to a level 3, which means they go to the 3rd level, which we call risk review. And BAR is trying really hard to rebrand this as Community Connects. So I'll try to use that language. I've been very well trained in risk review, so I will probably mess it up. But anyway, in the Community Connects, what happens is that's a meeting that happens once a week, and that's with our administrators, our student services team, so our 2 social workers, our 2 school counselors. We pull the nurse in when we need her, if it's a health related situation. And then that's how it's kind of typically functioned in the last year or so. We're really trying this year to pull in more people from the community in a way that is both appropriate for confidentiality, but also to have their minds as part of this. So these are students that we're seeing pretty high levels of concern around. So those are the kind of 4 elements of BAR. The goal is, as I alluded to at the beginning, but the goal as we're using it is really to provide a very systematic way to monitor every student, to provide intervention for every student, and then really to organize across the school and across the different departments to make sure that everyone has the same information about a student and is working to support that student's goal. Because that's something that, as many of you know, is challenging in schools where our kids might see all of us in the same day, but we don't see all of us in the same day. So really making sure that we're using it as a vehicle to organize ourselves and make sure we're providing that best experience. So that's kind of what BAR looks like. I think last year was a hard year to implement BAR. We ended up with a lot of students at that Community Connects level. We had a lot of students experiencing a lot of challenge, really intense challenges. I think that the level has decreased this year, largely, partly because we have big block now, which we didn't have last year. So that has the opportunity to provide some of those interventions that should be big block interventions, shouldn't be Community Connects interventions. And then part of it is, I think that our students are, our school is functioning a little bit more strongly. We're communicating better, and some of our students are getting better support early, which is eliminating the need for really intense support later. So that's how we're thinking about it this year. What we're still kind of working on, and granted, this kind of the BAR concept is a little bit of a culture shift for the middle school. Not everyone operates with the philosophy that exists behind BAR. So we're trying to really continue to look at our system and make sure that we're using it as effectively as we can. We were able to connect through our BAR coach with particularly Poland Regional Middle School and High School just over in Western Maine, which has been a long time BAR school. And they love it. Like, they cannot stop telling you how much they love BAR. And so we talk with them, which is really productive, but it leaves me feeling like we need to continue to work on this, because I would not say right now that I love BAR. I think I have a ton of potential, but I'm not sure we're quite hitting it yet. So we're continually trying to revamp that system and get to that point where it really functions really well for all of us. And I think we've made a lot of strides this year, and we will continue to do that. So this year, as part of the BAR contract, you get, I think it's 4 years of coaching, 3 years of 3 years of direct coaching, and then 1 year of consultation or something. So you get set trainings each year. So this year we had effective team meetings, which we had on the workshop day on October 7th, which was a really interesting training. Actually, we did a lot of what I might describe as more like introspective work than I might have expected. A lot of some self-assessing around your leadership style, your style around how you participate in groups and support other people, which was really interesting and actually quite fun to when we had to show it visually in the gym. Like if you were a promoter, you had to stand on one side. If you were a supporter on the other side, if you were an avoider. Anyway, it was very interesting. And just as one of the people that works with literally everyone, it makes a lot of sense. So anyway, that was I think a good training. We had some practice team meetings. We saw one of the things that I think we struggle with. This is obviously very human nature, but our meetings, we tend to not be super efficient because we stray into storytelling. When you have all the teachers in there that work with this kid, everyone wants to get their piece in. But we did this interesting thing during the training where we made up a kid, basically. Like my group's kid was Ferris Bueller. And you had to, go through the process. And we were able to be really, to work really comprehensively in under 5 minutes to come up with, the strengths for Ferris, the connections to school, concerns, a level, an intervention, a goal, data, what data would support that, and move really fast. And then the kind of debrief afterwards was, why was that easier to be so quick? And the answer was because we were very objective in looking at what we had in front of us and we're less prone to that story. So that's something to keep in mind as we go forward. Of course, we're humans, we like to tell stories. And especially we're very passionate about these kids. And so that elicits a lot of response. On Wednesday, we have trauma-informed praxis training in the afternoon. So that's our second bar training of the year. That's a virtual training, which I think is fine. That's sort of the way it had to work in our schedule. So that's kind of what bar looks like here. What questions do you have? I'm happy to show you the spreadsheet, and then so that it looks it's a little more tangible, I think, when you see the spreadsheet.
You alluded to cultural sort of integration. Are there challenges? Are there cohorts within the teaching community that are uncomfortable with the methodology?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Paul, but I think you said something like, I alluded to the kind of culture around bar, or the philosophy behind it. Is that what it was?
Yes, and are there members of the teaching staff that are uncomfortable with the methodology, or is there a uniform buy-in?
I think that the area of growth that is most important for us from a philosophical perspective is around intervention. We have many teachers who are really skilled in RTI and really skilled in differentiation, but that isn't necessarily something that's been kind of key to our practice here in the past. And so I think that's a little bit more, that's the kind of cultural piece that we need to work on, is the teacher level interventions, and how do we take these students who are providing challenges for, in the classroom because of a myriad of different things, keep them in the classroom and continue to provide the interventions that they need for support. So that's what I would say. That's kind of the cultural philosophical piece behind it.
For most of you probably know this, but I've been a big fan of bar for years and years, and I'm so happy that we have it in our schools and that you're doing it there, Colden. You mentioned that you've got some reservations or you're not entirely sure yet. Could you sort of describe what your concerns are right now?
I think my concern really comes from just we need more time with the system. It's a little clunky, is really what I would say. It's a lot of steps. It's a lot of organization, and we've tried really hard to make it equitable among teachers, so that our allied arts teachers are being involved because they want to be, and that's awesome. But the best way we can kind of come up with at this point to involve them means that they don't know every kid that comes up in the meeting that they're in. So that can be a little funky when they're like, I don't really know this kid. I'm not quite sure what to add. So that's been one of the challenges, is just sort of balancing the load, not having our resource room teachers attend every single possible meeting, even though their kids are coming up in those meetings. So just trying to be efficient and equitable. I think that's something that's a little difficult. And then right now, we just haven't kind of become comfortable enough with it that we all know the process and understand the steps and sort of work through it. Right now, it's very, it has to be very deliberate in that, okay, we're moving to this section, and we're doing this section, and we're doing this section, and then this is what happens. And so it's kind of very scripted right now, which can feel a little bit awkward. But I think we spent a lot of time on small block last year, and small block, especially for most of our cohorts, runs very smoothly right now. You know, they move very quickly. They're able to do it on their own without any support from, you know, from the admin or our bar coordinator, which, just so you know, like last year, Nadezhda or I would attend every small block meeting. We're not attending any now, and that's running pretty well for the most part. I think we need to, you know, really lean into big block this year, and kind of have that same process where we work through it and start to understand our roles within it. And then, you know, we'll look back next year and say, okay, look, now big block is running really smoothly and tightly.
So eventually, we'll have the bar model sort of programming 6 through 10,
Yes, 6 through
right?
10.
So in the early days of the bar model and the freshman academy, which is really the same thing before the pandemic, I mean, the data on student improvement, engagement, and success was huge. And so, you know, after we all get through, you all get through the pandemic and the effects, and get to know this program more with more and more success and buy-in, I think we're just going to keep seeing that. And I think, you know, what Brad was talking about in terms of caring adults, that's one of the hallmarks of the bar program, as you alluded to, Colden, is that students really feel like the teachers really care about them when they're like sort of on them and what's going on and how well they're doing all the time. So I remember, like, years ago, like the sophomores would say, well, they don't care about me this year. Well, the teachers did, but it was a different structure. So with the bar model going from 6 through 10, I mean, that I just bodes well for the future. I'm really not sure what to expect now as we come out of the pandemic and you all get more and more trained, but I'm very, very optimistic that you're doing it. I just want you to know, I'd like you to tell your staff how happy we are that your staff is doing it, how much time it takes and the training it takes. We can't support them enough. It's much more than 100% that we support you and your staff and what you're doing with this.
I have a question. I'd like to know about how the parents or guardians of these kids fit into the bar model. Where is the reporting out to the parent, or what kind of involvement could a parent have? Because this is not all happening in a vacuum. Home is a contributing factor to some of these risks that the kids are in. So where do we go with that?
I would say right now, parents really do not have much of any connection to the bar process. That's something we've talked about a lot and tried to come up with a way to do it efficiently and confidentially. We haven't really found the answer. And that's also something we've asked to our coach and to other schools, and haven't gotten a lot of great answers on, because I agree. I think that we're missing something when we're not including parents more directly in these discussions and this process. But we haven't figured out kind of the way to do that efficiently.
Colden, I'll ask a little different question. Do you think that during parent-teacher conferences or conferences with teachers, that because the approach is more of a team-oriented approach, that perhaps those conferences might be a bit more effective in that way?
I mean, I think that it gives more information for teachers to share. You know, we do conferences, as you said, John, in our teams. And so there's a lot to share within those teams, but yeah, I think it gives a little bit more of a structure to the types of information that we're tracking and sharing about students.
I mean, I know from working in middle schools that there are teams and then there are teams, right? So the traditional sort of junior high model team might not know. All the members of the team might have a different perspective on a student, but they might not have ever shared those perspectives. But in the middle school model, and certainly the bar model, those same members are sharing all the different perspectives about those kids. And I can't help but think that would lend a lot of strength when you have discussions with parents to see sort of the whole child, not just a piece of the child.
Yeah, I think we see that the most, you know, the really big communication boost comes from between our allied arts team and our grade level teams. You know, that gives a lot of, because there isn't a lot of connection there, you know, during the school day. So that's a really positive thing. So allied arts teachers can see this, they can look at students and say, oh, look, here's something I didn't know about the student. Here's this student's trusted adult. I should talk with them, that kind of thing. But I think the parent thing is one of the big lingering questions that will, you know, if we can kind of crack that, then that will really improve the effectiveness.
Sort of to piggyback on that, or to take it a little bit in a different direction, I'm really interested particularly in the building asset part of the bar model. And when you have these big block meetings and you identify a student as a level 3, and you might say, hey, this kid isn't getting the support at home. You know, you might have a caring adult at school, might have a lot of teachers who really care about the kid. Is there a way to sort of say, hey, this kid really could benefit from something outside of school, some other caring adult, some other relationship that would help the kid come to school more frequently, or help the kid make sure the kid is getting properly dressed or getting enough food or whatever it may be in terms of his or her needs?
Yeah, we make a lot of referrals out of Community Connects meetings to case management, to the landing place, to, you know, CMCA, to AIO, things like that. I think we can never, you know, I'm happy to see that spreadsheet. I think we can never have too many community connections, you know, in our community, but we do that a lot. And we also have those people, you know, one of the things that particularly our school counselors have been working on, and our social worker have been working on a lot this year, is bringing those institutions into the school. So last week we had a kind of a community resources fair. So we had like 7 or 8 different community organizations in the gym that set up like little booths, and kids filter through, and that was a lot of fun. And just showing, you know, first of all, allowing kids to have fun with those people, because there's a lot of really cool people in those organizations, and letting kids know that this is here for you. And by the way, almost all this is totally free. So if you want to take part in this, it's here for you. So I think that's something that's good. I think the thing that we need to continue to build is our intervention bank.
Yeah.
I think we have some good options in community, but we still run into some big obstacles like transportation. You know, we hit the transportation block all the time. And, you know, we had this discussion in a way at the parent advisory group sometimes, you know, about the school's role. I think we were talking about kind of in behavioral health at that point. But, you know, I think that we as a school are being put in a lot of positions that by definition are not the responsibility of the school, but by default, they're becoming the responsibility of the school. So the more intervention, the bigger the intervention bank outside of school, inside of school that we can build, the more effective we'll be.
I also have a question about peer involvement. We talk a lot about each student having at least one caring adult, but how about the idea of caring peers? Because there are a lot of loners out there, and they're either self-loaning or they feel pushed into lonerism. And, you know, so is there a place for peer support in this model?
I suppose not kind of organized into this model per se. I don't know honestly at the top of my head how this would be peer support, although I will say that iTime is often, you know, is usually a pretty collaborative activity that supports that. The other part of that kind of, so every student has crew time, which is what we're calling our advisory. We just sort of started that this year. In 6th and 7th grade, the crew group is the exact same as the Compass group. So there is a group of kids that they are really interacting with, and a teacher that they're interacting with very regularly in times that are really devoted to relationship building. So that's not really part of bar in terms of the specific systems in the organization, but it's certainly building assets as we are, combining, connecting them with that group of kids and doing restorative circles in crew time, participating in I-time during Compass time.
Can you explain I-time to me a little bit more? I don't know that I really get it.
Yeah, so I-time is, and it looks different depending on the week. I-time is really meant to be like direct instruction in relationship building, conflict management, some area of social emotional learning. So some of the things, like every single group started off the year kind of setting group norms. What are the things you need to feel comfortable in this classroom? What are the agreements that we can make as a group to support each other? Those types of things. So that's a pretty, that's kind of a low level one. That's pretty simple. There's other things like, one of the favorite ones is, and I can never remember the name, but it's about the rainbow, right? Who's like the rainbow in your cloud? Like, who's that one person when you look back that has like really kind of had an outsized influence on your life, and reflecting on that and sharing that with the group, and then thinking about how you can be a rainbow in somebody else's cloud and kind of being that person and that influential person. So that's another example. There's many different ones, and we have them all electronically. I'm happy to share them if you want to see. But they range from usually about 30 to 60 minutes. They almost always take longer than the amount of time specified, because kids tend to get really into them. There was another one called the adventure book, where kids kind of, it's a little more about dreaming and building this idea of aspirations. And if you could write this book for you to live, what would it be on it? And kids really love that one, particularly 8th graders, and they'll talk about it forever. So there's a lot of different facets to it. I'm happy to show you if you want to see.
Colin, I'm so impressed by both the program and your thoughtful execution of it. So I know you've already thought through the next question at some length, but how are the children themselves responding to this program, in the sense of, are they aware of the escalation in their cases, and how do they respond to the knowledge that they've been escalated through a remediation process of some kind?
I would say first that this is an area that needs improvement. I think the most noticeable areas, first of all, are we've kind of progressed to a point where last year kids would be like, this I-time thing happened in class, and that's weird. And because they're middle school kids, that's how they reflect on things most of the time. But this year, kids are feeling much more comfortable in them. They expect them. And many of them, like one time, we had a teacher out on a Monday, so we weren't gonna have a sub do I-time, so they did it the next day. And kids were like, I didn't get to do I-time today, Mr. G. What is that?
Yeah.
So they're starting to expect it and build into that. I think the kind of second thing that you see, which is a little more informal and anecdotal, but you will often see kids that, like a teacher will mention something to them and they'll be like, how do you know that? I told that to this person. How do you know that? And so they're those types of things, like, well, we talk to each other, believe it or not, but we talk about it and we share information and that kind of thing. And so kids notice that. And then the big thing that Nadezhda is doing this year, which is awesome, is anytime a student progresses to the Community Connects level, she's doing a root cause analysis with them, which is this very simple worksheet that we stole again from Poland. But going through with students and saying, like, here's the behavior or the challenge or the concern, or whatever area it is that's bringing you to this level that we're seeing, that's kind of eliciting this level of concern, and then it's just asking the why question, and it's funny, I kind of saw it and I was like, skeptical, I guess I would say. I did not think it would work super well. If you keep asking middle school kids why, they're going to get frustrated and kind of turn off, but it really does work. So we've gotten to some pretty interesting places with kids when you dig down, and suddenly when we get to Community Connects, instead of working on this kind of what we're seeing in the class and trying to provide intervention for a symptom, we're a lot closer to the cause. We're not always right there, but we're a lot closer to it and providing intervention that are starting to be a lot more effective. So those are the areas that I think kids are seeing it. I think they can see it a lot more. I think the biggest thing that we need to find a way to do is to really involve kids more in the goal setting piece. Right now, it happens a little bit like staff are setting a goal for a kid, collecting data on it, and then talking about it. And it is not kind of systematically being shared with the kid. And
So,
not something
they have some agency in all of this. They're not victims of a process, right? I got it. Thank you.
right.
Yeah.
Do you want to see the spreadsheet real quick, just so you can see what we're working on? Makes it a little
I
bit.
think we should probably move along in our agenda because we're gonna run out of time. That's up to you guys if you want to send it to us. All right, that's up
I'd
to
like
you.
it sent, yeah. I'd like to see it.
Sure, no problem.
Colton, I
But
appreciate.
again, thank you for being here. And again, thank you and your entire staff for doing this. This is absolutely fantastic. I think one of the keys to our success is the bar model in those 5 grades and in your 3 especially.
Yeah. I think it's helpful too for the board to hear that though we're doing it, the implementation does take time. And it's not just that we've got the label and, magic will happen. Colton being a leader in this, it takes time and effort, and he's been really reflective about, trying to build culture in the middle school, and we're making baby steps and it's happening, but it does take a lot of time. So
I'm impressed with the admission of it tending to be clunky at times. You don't often in lots of parts of our life, people don't admit the downsides.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good. I agree.
And I think as adults, when we're honest, kids see that and they like it. They want to follow that lead. So we're leading by example this way, and I appreciate it very much.
awesome. Thank you, Colton, and thank you for providing a chance to do some Q&A too. I think it's really helpful to get a better understanding, and
Really
I think
helpful. Yeah.
as Colton was describing some of those risk review or community connections, it does bring us back to those community level resources too, which I think will help to support our schools. So I think that project has multiple purposes. So that's great. So really the last thing that I have just to tie this all together is the high school has been using the bar model for a bit longer. And I think what's interesting in sort of everything that you're seeing for the curriculum presentation today is over time, when Jesse and I have looked at attendance, because pre-COVID, we were going to look specifically at attendance and improving attendance at the high school level, because one of the trends that we noticed was that the freshman year and the sophomore year, attendance wasn't too bad. And senior year, it tends to be better because kids are, they sort of know what their trajectory is for the most part senior year. And they're so last year, so they're taking it a bit more seriously. Juniors had the biggest attendance related issue, and it was the year where the bar model stopped, and really the primary component that did get carried through for juniors and seniors is that risk review component. So even though they're not part of like the bar model and an academy their junior year, they were still pulling in risk review, but that junior year seemed to be an area that we noted that we wanted to sort of continue that focus. So that is still happening at the high school with the focus on the attendance component and then continuing to do their risk review processes. But I just wanted to note that piece because talking with Jesse and hearing him reflect a little bit on the bar model, that's still an area that we want to continue to pull through. We don't want to extend the bar model to junior and senior year just because the makeup of the staff is challenging. In middle school, they're already in teams. And Colton, don't feel like you have to stay on, by the way. You need to scoot out. I know you're super busy. So middle school, they're already on teams, and in high school, the freshman academy is a team. Sophomore academy is a smaller team, but in order to have multi-level electives and lots of choice within the schedule, to make each grade level a team would create challenges with scheduling. So we know that that's not the answer, but really having some focus on attendance and trying to target that junior year for attendance and just ensuring that we have a really sound risk review process is something that the high school is focusing on. And I just want to add this to sort of tie in our last meeting on pathways. As Jesse was reflecting too, he said, you know, we really have that academy model freshman and sophomore year to support their foundational years in high school. And then we're looking at junior and senior year as priming them for pathways. This, or you use the word priming for pathways. I'm like, is that something new that you came up with? I said, I really like it because it does sort of tie in, like, you know, you're creating this foundation and then these pathways are developing for students. And we need that level of, you know, additional electives and some creative options. We need our staff to be flexible and not necessarily in teams, especially their junior and senior year, just to be able to have that level of flexibility and creativity. So I thought that was kind of an interesting conversation to reflect on. So I just wanted to bring that up too. So I think that's pretty much it. Maybe one more little pathways related piece just to tie back into last meeting where Jesse did present on the various pathways, and we talked about the high school extended learning opportunities and internships. That's very much up and moving. Molly Staples continues to do a great job, and Molly and I met this morning with Rick Wilson, who is sort of the state level manager of the grant. And he said, if I had to pick top 3 districts and organizations in the state that are using this grant out of 26 grant recipients, he said RSU13 is in that top 3. So that was really exciting to hear in terms of having some innovative practices and really trying to trailblaze through some of the red tape. There's a lot of it. I'm spending more time on things that I didn't necessarily anticipate, like liability and compensation and taxation burden and where all of these things sort of fall. But it's been great work. It's exciting work. And tomorrow I'm going to be joining into a virtual training through it's called ELON. It's an ELO network, Extended Learning Opportunity Network in New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a bit further along in this work than I think Maine is. So I think that's an area that we can look to do some additional learning. So I'm looking forward to that.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We should set the next meeting.
Yes. Does would November 28th work for this group, or do you want to do the 21st?
I'd rather do the 28th myself, but I'll go with whatever the majority of you want to do.
Isn't that? Oh, no, that's after Thanksgiving. Right?
Yeah, the 21st.
Why I like it.
Yeah, the 21st for us is a workshop day. I'm just envisioning being completely exhausted because we're doing some safety related training.
That's fine. That's
okay.
fine. Yeah, 28.
Yeah, I prefer the 28th as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll plan
Okay.
for Monday, the 28th at 3:15.
Yep.
Sounds like a winner.
All right.
Like a winner. Yeah.
And we'll plan to have that be sort of a proficiency based focus, and I should have a whole bunch of NUIA data to share with you.
Excellent.
Great. And thanks for organizing these meetings along our different, goals, missions. Yeah.
Sure. Sounds good. All right. I will stop the recording.
So, and